Um, let's begin. My name is Rob Hack, for those of you who don't know me already. I'm the host of these events we do from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council with a generous grant from DBET and SBA. We are able to put on this series of webinars. In normal times, these are seminars that we have at the Foreign Trade Zone at Pier 2. But because of the pandemic, we've moved all of these to webinars, and all of the events this year and for the rest of this year will be online, such as this. Normally, our events start at 9 a.m. Hawaii time, but because we have so many speakers today from Japan, we've moved it to 3 p.m. so that it's more amenable time for them at 10 a.m. Japan time on Friday. So thank you for joining the webinar today. The focus is exporting to Japan for Hawaii companies, and we have quite a slate of experts in their various areas speaking about the topics that are specifically aimed at helping our Hawaii companies export more product to Japan, whether you're new to exporting or it's market expansion. And just exporting more. I think that there's plenty of opportunity for you to learn something today about Japan. I wanted to just bring up a couple of websites here. This is the Hawaii Pacific Export Council website at hawaiiexportsupport.com. Lots of information, including an upcoming calendar of events on the left side. These webinars, and in the past when they were live seminars, are recorded, and we, with some minor editing, put these on our YouTube archive here. So if you were to go to YouTube and search for Hawaii Pacific Export Council, you will also find a vast library of now about 80 of these past webinars and seminars. DBET also maintains an archive, and you can find those at the DBET website. And here is the DBET website where you focus on HiSTEP, the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program. And Jamie Lum will speak about that again in a minute, but the website is invest.hawaii.gov, and you click on this exporting tab here and you'll get all the information you need. So with that, I'd like to bring in Jamie Lum to say a few words about the HiSTEP program and what it's doing to help Hawaii companies. So, Jamie, please.
Mahalo, Rob, and aloha to everyone joining us today, and a special mahalo to all of the speakers that have joined to be part of today's webinar. Thank you all for being here. As Rob has already mentioned, the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program, or HiSTEP as we call it, is supported by a grant that we received from the Small Business Administration. And we do work with several partners to be able to administer this program, one of which is Hawaii Pacific Export Council, HPEC, and they help us to put together these webinars. So just briefly, we have three components, integrated components of the program, and you'll see it right there. So thank you for putting up the website, as Rob has already said, invest.hawaii.gov under the exporting tab. So we have our export readiness, of which these webinars are part of that. In addition to the webinars, we also will partner the companies that register for the HiSTEP program with one of our HiSTEP partner organizations like HPEC, like the Small Business Development Centers, like the Women's Business Center, et cetera. We have several. And these people can advise these companies, help them with their export plan, or perhaps other issues that they might have with their organization, their business. So that's all part of the export readiness. And all of that is to help prepare you, the companies, to be part of either joining us at one of our Hawaii pavilions, or to apply for company assistance, which are the other two portions of the HiSTEP program. So Hawaii Pavilions have been a bit limited now because of the pandemic and limits on in-person events and traveling, but we do expect that they will open up, and we still do have 2 on our calendar for this year, which are the Hankyu Hawaii Fair and the Tokyo International Gift Show. So you can contact us if you want to be a part of those events. And the last portion, the company assistance, companies can apply up to $10,000, can apply for up to $10,000 of funds to help implement portions of your export plan. So if you're interested in that, please take a look. I do want to emphasize we have the application process is open right now, and the applications are available, and the deadline is June 30th. So there's still some time left, but we would like to encourage companies that if you're interested to please go on our website, look through the information and apply. Really where to start out is to register as a HiSTEP company. Basically, we want some information about your company, it doesn't matter if you're a new to export company, as Rob mentioned, or a market expansion company. The program is open to all levels of companies that are at all different levels of exporting. So when you register, you give us some information about your company, and this is how we put you in touch with one of our partner organizations, and then we'll go from there. So that's it in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. But again, mahalo to Rob and to all of our speakers and to all of you for joining us today. Aloha.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Our next speaker, we're very fortunate to have Aoki-san as the Consul General of the Japan Council here in Hawaii, in Nu'uanu. Aoki-san is going to speak about the Hawaii relationship with Japan and what's going on in Japan to help Hawaii companies do business there. So Aoki-san, when you're ready, please begin. You will have to unmute yourself. Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. Yes. Aloha, everyone. I'm Yutaka Aoki, Consul General of Japan in Honolulu. Thank you for inviting me to join all of you today. My presentation will consist of 2 parts: COVID-19 data, number of number of cases, the current status and the situation, and next, vaccine administration, the kind of the projection. And then move to Hawaii-Japan relations, first fact sheet, and then how I export to Japan. I think this webinar to promote the export to Japan, I think both in pandemic and after pandemic. So I thought the best way to start with the discussions would be to give you an overview of the current situation in Japan with regard to COVID. So let's put it slide, yes. Yes, these 2 graphs is the number of cases in Hawaii and Japan. I copy and paste of these 2 graphs, from the web page of Hawaii government and Japanese government. As you can see, the most recent daily count of both Hawaii and Japan are 85 and 4,302. I think Hawaii's number have remained relatively well controlled, but Japan is currently in its 4th wave of infections and on the brink of its 3rd state of emergency.
Yeah. I'm talking to Honda-san from here.
Okay. And please look at the Japan graph. Yes, early this year, the beginning of January, they hit the records about 7,800. And Japan, the Prime Minister Suga declared a 2nd state of emergency. And yes, dramatically decreased the number. And early March, a month ago, the daily number is almost 1,000. But now, especially yesterday, beyond 4,000. And now people or Japanese government is considering third state of emergency. And actually, the Japanese people are very, very sensitive how to contain the COVID pandemic. And not now Japan is not in the atmosphere for Japanese people to go out for sightseeing. So in this sense, I'm afraid we have to wait another several months for Japanese people to visit Hawaii again. Okay, please go to second page. Okay, then the COVID vaccine administration. When we look at vaccine administration numbers, over 30% of Hawaii's population has already received at least one dose, but Japan has only vaccinated 1% of its population. Vaccination started on December 15th in Hawaii, on February 17th in Japan, 2 months behind. And yes, Japan is just a starting stage. So I circled the beginning of the Hawaii graph. Japan is very beginning stage. But both President Biden and Lieutenant Governor Josh Green said July 4th this year, Independence Day from COVID pandemic. And yes, it's a very good news. And I'm rather optimistic. But Tokyo is, Japan is a little bit just a starting point. And I cannot say when our Japan's Independence Day, but I hope Tokyo Olympic Games starting late July, we can have, as they call, herd immunity and maybe 70 or 80% vaccination. Okay, please go to next slide. Now that we have a better idea of the situation in Japan, so I'd like to go briefly into Hawaii-Japan relations and then about Hawaii's export to Japan. People have often described Hawaii in relation to its location in the Pacific as a crossroads of the United States and Japan. But Hawaii in itself holds a greater significance beyond just its geographical location. For many, many decades, Hawaii has been playing a key role in the bilateral relationship between our two nations. Speaking of our two nations, Prime Minister Suga is on a special aircraft right now on his way to DC to meet with President Biden for a summit meeting tomorrow, making him to be only the first foreign leader to meet in person with the president. This news is very, Japanese people really pleased with this news. Okay, so let's now take a look at just how close the relationship is between Hawaii and Japan. First, population of Japanese ancestry, about 50% of Hawaii's population. A little bit, there are first generation and second generation, maybe now the seventh generation. And some Japanese American has both Japanese ancestry and also sometimes the European ancestry or Hawaiian ancestry. So if includes these old Japanese ancestry, the percentage is more than 20%. Anyway, these Japanese American or Japanese ancestry, have been playing a very key, important role regarding our Japan very close friendship between Hawaii and Japan. And second figure is Japanese nationals in Hawaii, about 30,000, includes Japanese people working in Hawaii and their families and international students and some elderly people who chose the Hawaii to happy retirement life. And third figure, that is most impressive one. Japanese visitor arrivals 1.54 million in 1 year. And Japanese population is 127 million. So 1 out of 100 Japanese people visit Hawaii in a year. And this year, the total number of the visitors visiting Hawaii is 10 million. And I understand about 70% from mainland United States. And Japan is the first or top the foreign country or international market. And I understand second place was Canada, about 500,000. And these Japanese visitors spending 2 billion a year, huge contribution to Hawaii economy, I think. And also very good example representing the friendship between Hawaii and Japan is a sister city relationship. Hawaii state has a sister city relationship with 5 prefectures. I think Hokkaido, Okinawa, Yamaguchi, Ehime, Hiroshima, Fukuoka. And now Yamaguchi Prefecture is preparing to have the sister city relationship. And Honolulu City has 11 sister city relationship. And this, bilateral relationship, there are many events or personal exchange or Hawaii fair or something. And yes, this sister city relationship we can use to promote that export to Japan by Hawaii goods. So please go to next page. I looked at a little bit about the trade statistics by US government, and I picked up these 4 items: plums, papayas, coffee, macadamia nuts, chocolate, etc. And these exports from Hawaii are popular, I think, because of the Hawaii brand. For example, plums and papayas, with regard to the volume of price, Hawaii is no match to Thailand or Philippines or Vietnam. And I understand that exporting country of plum, Thailand is #1, #2 Vietnam, #3 India. But Hawaii still has the market share. And the most surprising is papaya. The #1 is Philippines, and market share is 85%. And second is the United States, 15%. But the price of the papaya of Philippines is less than half of that of the United States. Still, Hawaii has the market share. So I can say, as I mentioned, many Japanese people visit Hawaii, and really Japanese people like Hawaii. And there are many, I can mention many reasons. For example, the beautiful nature of Hawaii and abundant aloha spirit and very high quality service of Hawaii tourism. And the Japanese American present a good impression to Japan. And Japanese culture is greatly appreciated and understood in Hawaii. Anyway, these, we have a very strong supporter in Japan. And, yes, this is my observation. Hawaii brand is very strong, and Japanese people want to buy plums cultured in North Shore when they cook the garlic shrimp Hawaii style. So my observation is rainforest and Yes, Hawaii's export is smaller volume, but Hawaii brands are trusted as a high quality and have a cool or attractive image due to the closeness of our peoples and the strong affinity the Japanese have for Hawaii and its culture. And I think it's better to reinforce or emphasize the Hawaii brand when marketing its item. And whether during COVID or after, companies should concentrate more efforts into marketing these products available online, and product shipping is another key. And I understand that today we have the very special speaker, the specialist of the online shopping and product shipping. So I'm really looking forward to have hearing these presentations. Thank you very much. Mahalo nui loa.
Aoki-san, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation and perfect for our audience. We greatly appreciate you being here. The next speakers are Jay Biggs and his colleague Hirono Taki. They're with the U.S. Commercial Service, and they're based at the U.S. Consulate in Osaka. It's Friday morning for them, and we thank them very much for being here. I'm going to make you a co-host, Jay, and you are ready to begin.
Okay, great. Can you see my presentation?
Perfectly, and your audio is very clear.
Okay, great. Well, I want to start by thanking Rob and DBIT and HiSTEP for your inviting us to speak. My name is Jay Biggs. I'm the Principal Commercial Officer here in the U.S. Consulate in Osaka. We're part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. My colleague Taki-san is someone who's one of our senior specialists in the Commercial Service Japan. She covers tourism, consumer goods, hospitality, and she has had a long-term working relationship with Hawaii. So go ahead. This first slide is a little bit about who we are. We are part of the, like I said, we're part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and you know, my office particularly focuses on these sectors that I have listed here. I know that John Holman from our U.S. Export Assistance Center is going to be speaking as well, so I won't go into too much detail on this. Let's see, having a little problem advancing my slide here. Let's see. Okay, the other resource I want to mention is the Foreign Agricultural Service. We have a team here, including Ms. Baba and Jeff Zimmerman. They are more involved with agricultural products, but they, you know, our mandates do overlap a little bit, and so, you know, please feel free to contact if you have questions. You know, not only Taki-san, you'll get her email address later, but Baba-san as well. Let's see. Next, I want to talk about the current retail situation in Japan. And Aoki, Consul General Aoki had addressed this to some degree, so I won't spend too much time on this. But we are essentially going into our third, potentially our third emergency declaration, and that has, you know, the first two had essentially canceled and closed certain certain things like stores and gyms and theaters, and the second one has sort of and the current semi-emergency measures have sort of forced retail stores to close early, restaurants and bars to close early. So now I want to kind of move on to the overall retail market. And there are really the 2 points I want to make in this slide. One is that if you look at, you know, the total retail market from 2018 to 2020, you see that it has continued to grow, not not significantly, but it is continuing to grow, which is a good point. And when you look at these numbers, the thing that really stands out is the medicine and toiletry sales have increased dramatically, and obviously this has to do with medicine, masks, soaps, hand sanitizers. Those are the things that have really started to increase. Let's see. Okay, now the consumer market trends, and I'll provide a few more statistics about this later, but we're going to see that e-commerce is growing. Mark Fiotti is going to be talking about this, in more detail. High-end products we're seeing are still selling very well, and we're also seeing a real trend of products that are related to the stay-home economy. So first, I want to talk about the business to consumer, the e-commerce market size. What we see here, basically, around 8% growth from 2018 to 2019. But the key point here is this ratio of e-commerce. We're seeing in 2019, about 7% of all commerce was done by e-commerce, where in the US, that's closer to 10%. At least in 2018, it was about 10%. So what I think this slide points out is that there is a lot of potential growth in Japan's e-commerce market. And the next slide is monthly online spending. There's some really, I'll let you take a look at this, but there's some real dramatic numbers here. The one is that the online spending on travel dropped 75%, but food and beverage sales increased by 74%, and then home electronics also increased 52%. So that so this really bolsters my point about there's a real increase in what we call the stay-at-home economy sectors. But before we go discuss that too much, I want to look at department store sales. And the key here with department store sales is that you're seeing basically an 11% drop in sales at department stores, where you're seeing a lot of the sectors, food, apparel, and cosmetics, interestingly, drop. Sales of cosmetics at department stores dropped 22%, and really the only thing that has increased are high-end goods. So this really I think bolsters the point that that in the apparel and the cosmetics and food sectors, there's a real shift to more e-commerce. So when we talk about the stay-at-home economy, what we're seeing is that foods, are growing, and particularly specialty niche foods, spices. Sales of spices grew significantly, and I think that sort of bodes well for sort of niche Hawaiian products that can kind of appeal to that. Home appliances have increased, telework, and then home decor products sales have also increased. And that again is something that I know that many of you in the audience are involved with. So this is kind of an interesting slide about what was popular in 2020. A Japanese TV program did this, and what you see is that movies, TV shows, Animal Crossing is a video game. Those have all increased. Zoom is becoming a popular topic, and I think just like the rest of the world, I think Japanese are to some degree suffering from Zoom fatigue. Number 10, the online whatever. I think anything that's online is popular. But I would point your attention to 6 and 7, the reusable shopping bags and washable handmade face masks. Those are things that there's a real interest in, specialty fabrics that help differentiate you from your neighbor. And I think that's a potential niche market opportunity for Hawaiian companies. One of the questions that Rob asked me before this webinar started was to talk about trade shows. Are trade shows and trade events coming back? And the short answer is yes. These shows that we've listed, gift shows last year, this year, golf fair, building materials shows, these have all taken place in person. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, I don't have the figures here with me, but we're seeing a significant decrease in the number of visitors at these trade shows, in part because of these states of emergency. But we're actually seeing sales at these trade shows either not dropping or staying almost even from pre-COVID situation. So, it's good and bad. I think we're getting, serious buyers are still coming to the trade shows. And then virtual trade shows. As you probably are aware, virtual events in Japan have not traditionally been popular. Japan is a very contextual based society. Face-to-face meetings are incredibly important. But Japanese businesses are getting used to doing online meetings. Our office has done tons and tons of webinars this past year, and they've been very well attended. And what we're seeing in Japan is, in addition to some shows being directly on, directly in person, we're seeing a lot of hybrid trade shows where they only have a certain number of booths and a very limited number of people that attended in person, but much of the booths are done virtually. And actually, our colleagues at the Foreign Agricultural Services have actually done a virtual trade show in Japan as well. And one of the things that one of the trade shows that we have pointed to that have been a real success was the 2020 Hankyu Hawaii Fair. That was one that they did online. They really were innovative. They had sort of an online art fair, and then they had some YouTube classes like on hula dancing and I believe on online cooking. And so, I think they really stepped up their Hankyu really stepped up their game in terms of doing a good job with a virtual trade fair. Now, travel between Hawaii and Japan, Consul General Aoki spoke about this. But one of the things I wanted to highlight was the Hawaiian Tourism and the Hawaiian Tourism Japan have organized a number of events, a series of 3 events. Last month, they had a sort of a briefing on the COVID situation. They had more than 1,000 participants. Next week, they're doing one on sustainable tourism. And then I think on May 19th, they're doing one on educational travel. So, your colleagues here in Hawaii are doing a very good job of keeping Hawaii relevant to the Japanese market. And then finally, this is something that Consul General Aoki alluded to. Japan has something called a Go-To campaign, which was where the Japanese government subsidized travel inside Japan. They subsidize about 30% of accommodation costs and about 20% for gifts. And they had, before the program stopped, they had almost 88 million people participate. And what that says to me is there's a real pent-up demand for tourism in Japan. And I know as soon as Hawaii opens up, that demand is Hawaii is going to be sort of on the top of everyone's list to travel to. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. And here are our contact information, mine, Taki-san's, and also my colleague in Honolulu, John Holman. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Jay. Excellent presentation. I have a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. Do you see an increase in Japan in the market with consumers interested in more organic or natural certified products? Are things going in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, Japan, as your audience probably knows, has always had an interest in sort of high quality, sort of high end products, and that combined with Japan's natural predilection towards protecting the environment has led to a real definite niche market for Hawaiian products in that sector, I think.
Just anecdotally, I agree with your comment about the reusable shopping bags, because I have been at Whole Foods in Hawaii and seen some Japanese visitors come in and buy every possible bag that was in stock to take back to Japan. And then I think they resell them, the Whole Foods branded shopping bags there. So that would be a good business for a Hawaii company, just to get into some good, strong, reusable, Aloha styled reusable shopping bags. You mentioned briefly agriculture. On your slide, was there an FAS contact, or should people reach out to John Holman first for agriculture related questions?
You can reach out to John. I actually listed Jeff Zimmerman and Miss Baba on the slides, and they were, I would reach out to Baba-san and also to Taki-san, and then CC John as kind of a strategy for if you have a agricultural or food beverage related product.
Okay.
We work very closely. We work
Okay,
very
great.
closely. So, if I receive inquiry regarding food products, I can forward it to, ATO colleagues. So.
Excellent. So Taki-san, I'm glad you chimed in, because my next question is really for you. We have a lot of Hawaii companies that make excellent creams and lotions and sunscreens, kind of a cosmetic product. In the US, it might not be considered a cosmetic, but I know in Japan, it's considered a cosmetic. And so I'm curious, because these companies often get confused about the testing that is required by the Japanese government to allow products to be sold in Japan. So if a company has questions like that, are you a good source to answer those questions, or who can help with that sort of activity?
Yes, we have Mr. Ono, who is the expert of covering the cosmetics, not just cosmetics, but also fragrance, soaps, shampoos. Those products have to be tested and get received approval from the authority.
Now, I have helped companies in the past get that testing, and it's actually not very difficult. But what the Japanese authorities want is a more rigorous testing in Japan than what the Hawaii company is used to doing in the US market. And I think that sometimes the small Hawaii company gets a little bit overwhelmed with the Japanese language, because most of the documents are in Japanese or what have you. But it's really not very difficult, and it's also not extremely expensive. So anyway, I'm sure that you'll be hearing from some more of our Japanese companies with these questions. But
Yeah, because Japanese manufacturers also have to go through all those, testing. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, both Jay
maybe
and...
I can forward the inquiry regarding the cosmetics to Mr. Ono, our expert. So
Great.
you can contact John Holman, and then he knows
John
that.
John Holman will be speaking next, so
Yeah.
he'll have his contact information on the slides. We have a couple of questions that came in, and I'm just going to go through them very quickly because I think they can be answered fairly quickly. What is the current travel restrictions from Japan to Hawaii and vice versa that is preventing people from traveling? And I can answer that there's really two things. If you were to travel to Japan from Hawaii, whether you were vaccinated or not, you would still need to enter a 2-week quarantine in Japan. That if you're a US citizen or a Japanese citizen, it doesn't matter. You still have to go into a 2-week quarantine. And when you're coming back to Hawaii, whether you're a visitor or a Hawaii resident, you have to get that test that's required to be negative. Whereas if you're in the mainland, you can do it at CVS, and I think it costs, I did it, it was $140. But in Japan, that same test costs around $500 or $600, and it's a bit cost prohibitive for some people. It probably costs more than the airfare itself. So right now, to my understanding, there's only about 1 flight per day going between Honolulu and Tokyo. Maybe Brian Suzuki can address that a little bit later. But that's really the main problem, is just the quarantines both ways that are keeping people from traveling.
Rob, can we just put in a plug
sure.
just real quickly for Hawaiian Airlines? We actually did a webinar for Hawaiian Airlines recently that was promoting their they have 1 flight per week from Honolulu to Kansai to Osaka, and that's actually a really good option for people that are trying to come to Western Japan, because they don't have to quarantine in Tokyo. So they're, right now the Japanese officials are looking at sort of right now that the cap on the number of passengers per flight is going up to about 100 per flight until the end of Golden Week, and then it may go up after that as well. So that should be something that's getting better over time.
I think too, if we heed the words that Aoki-san said toward the beginning, that Japan is potentially 2 to 3 months behind Hawaii in terms of vaccinations. And I know this anecdotally because of when I'm speaking with my family in Tokyo, I hear this, that there's no conversation yet about when they can get a vaccine. But I think once they can, Japan will do that quite efficiently. Everybody will be vaccinated, and I think that people will be much more open to travel. But I also believe that Japan has this big cloud hanging over it right now called the Olympics, and they're trying everything in their power to get the Olympics finished. And then once the Olympics are finished, maybe they can move on to some of these other things. One more quick question before we move on. I'll read it out loud to you. We are a manufacturer that makes a local Hawaii-made, locally sourced disinfectant, either household or industrial. And what is the it says, what is the temperature concerning that EPA registered Hawaii made license? Is there any feedback on that? What do you think about selling such a product in the Japanese market?
Well, without addressing, I don't know, maybe Taki-san could address the technical side of that, but I think there is probably some demand for some organic types of cleaners, but I would suggest send an email to Taki-san directly to kind of because that's going to take a while to answer, I think. But yeah, I think there is potentially a market.
I agree with that, and you probably want to talk to one of the upcoming speakers, Brian Suzuki, about how to ship such a product to Japan, because it's heavy and dense, and it'll be expensive to ship it by air, and maybe some airlines don't want that flammable product, and it's more likely to go by ocean and what have you. So we can talk about that later. Okay, great. Jay and Taki-san, thank you so much for that. Our next speaker, we've alluded to a couple times, is the very famous John Holman. And John, are you unmuted?
Yeah, hi, Rob. I don't know about fame.
Hi, how are you?
Infamous. Yeah, but
infamous. I guess I should have said infamous. So I have your slides here. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, so for the audience, Jay and Taki-san are commercial service staff at the U.S. consulate in Osaka, whereas John Holman works for the same organization, but he's based here in Honolulu. And we'd like very much for you to use him as your window into the commercial service, not just for the Osaka region, but Tokyo and anywhere else in the world. And John can explain how many offices there are of the commercial service worldwide. So John, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Great to see everybody, and especially Jay and Taki-san. Wonderful to see you joining us from Japan. For those of you that don't know, I am the director here in Honolulu for the U.S. Commercial Service, covering the entire state of Hawaii and the U.S. Pacific Territories. And we have 250 offices in 80 countries around the world, including Japan, of course, most often at the U.S. Embassy, sometimes in the business districts. And we have 100 offices across the United States, including mine here in Honolulu. And so our mission is to help companies at every stage of the export process, help them to identify what markets are best suited for them, help them to be introduced and match made with partners overseas, and help them to navigate every stage of the export process, from understanding standards, regulations, documentation, customs processes, protecting your intellectual property, all that good stuff. And so I serve as your local point of contact for our global network. We are your tax dollars at work. And I can introduce you to the J-Bigs and Hirono Taki-sans of the world, whether it's in Brazil, South Africa, France, Korea, or Japan. And I'd say when you first come to us, we'd look at, what are some of your needs? What are you looking to do on the international front? Are you ready for export? If not, what are some of the things that we might need to consider? And some of the resources that we have that we can bring on to bear, you see here on the slide. So market intelligence, what's happening in a market like Japan? Is now a good time to do business there? What are some of the barriers to entry? What are some of the opportunities? These are some of the things that we can provide you. We have written market research on our website, trade.gov, but we also can provide market intelligence for you specifically and your business. We also conduct trade events, which typically are done in person, overseas, and on the US side, most often on the 9th Hawaiian island, known as Las Vegas, where most of the major trade shows take place. And we do matchmaking for US firms and the foreign buyers that we recruit at those trade shows. We are doing some virtual events right now, but I expect things to pick up later this year and into 2022 when in-person events start to happen again. And then international partners. One of the most important things to doing business internationally is finding good partners or buyers or representatives to work with, because they represent your business and your brand, and they're responsible for you getting paid, which is very important. And they understand some of the nuances of what's going on in country, especially in a market like Japan, where culturally it's very complex. And so what we do is we help you to find pre-screened, qualified, high-quality partners in country. And because we're the US government, it gives your business immediate legitimacy, and it tends to shake out less legitimate partners on the foreign side. And then consulting and advocacy. These are answering all the questions you may have about the ins and outs, nuts and bolts of exporting. And then advocacy, if there's some trade barriers or unfair trade practices at play, we can take steps to help mitigate that. Next slide, please.
Sure. Can you make sure to your logo guy here with the gold key, just touch on the gold key service, because that is a service that costs a small amount of money, but it's something that the HiSTEP program can cover that cost.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for that. So probably our most popular, well-known service is called the Gold Key service. And this is where you tell us what types of partners you would like to meet on the foreign side. So let's just say you wanted to export to the Whole Foods equivalent in Japan, because you sell the Whole Foods in Hawaii. So what we would do is we would work with J-Bigs and Taki-san in Osaka and our team in Tokyo, and they would contact firms like Whole Foods, the buyers there, tell them about your product or service in your business, what you're looking to do. And then those that are interested So we don't want to introduce you to people that aren't interested. We will introduce you to those partners on the foreign side that are interested in working with you. And in normal times, when you're able to travel, we arrange the venue, the transportation, translator, all that stuff. And the cost for a small business, which 99.9% of businesses in Hawaii are, if you have less than 500 employees, the cost is just $950. And so it's basically like a personalized trade mission for your business to be introduced to pre-screened, high qualified partners, and us being the US government facilitating those meetings tend to generate higher quality meetings for you than just going to a trade show and collecting business cards. That's the Gold Key service, which you can utilize the HiSTEP funds. If you received some HiSTEP money, you can use that money to purchase a Gold Key service. There is the halfway to a Gold Key called an initial market check. And that's where we do all the upfront kind of contacting partners. And then we provide you with a report and their contact details and what they said about their level of interest in working with you. And the cost for that is just $350. And so that's a tremendous value. And if you would like to move forward with the Gold Key, so basically taking that research and those contacts and converting them into meetings, so we would facilitate the meetings for you, you can apply that $350 to the $950 Gold Key service fee. Or you could just take those contacts and contact them yourself directly. So that's the initial market check and the Gold Key service. And then over there is something I'm very proud of, and that is for every dollar in taxpayer funding our agency receives, we generate $392 in sales for US companies around the world. And so I don't know about other federal agencies, most agencies can't quantify return on investment. Fortunately, we can, based on the sales we help generate for US companies, and it's 392 times, which is quite a return on investment. Next slide, please. My contact details there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and happy to work with you, answer your questions, or get you connected with our team overseas. Aloha.
Great. Thank you so much, John. That was a wonderful presentation on your office. And just as a reminder to the attendees, I'll make all of these presentations available later and share them with you in a PDF form. Our next speaker is Mary Dale from SBA. And again, when I hear the word SBA, I feel very grateful because we have to thank SBA for funding that comes from them to DBAT that allows us to have the HiSTEP program and allows us to put on these webinars and also the one-on-one company mentoring. So thank you for that, Mary. And the other reason that it's good to hear from Mary is she can tell us a little bit about what SBA programs are available internationally. So please, Mary.
Thanks, Rob. Aloha, everybody. Just want to go quickly through, we got a couple of different programs that SBA has for exporters. So for potential exporters as well as existing exporters. So we have our Export Express program, our international trade, and we have our export working capital. So I'm going to go a bit, and I did have a question actually for one of the speakers earlier. They had mentioned the ag stuff. We're looking at, SBA is looking to do an agricultural roundtable in the next month or so. So we might want to get in touch with you, maybe do it through John, and invite you to participate with that roundtable event that we'll be having, because we do have some folks that would be interested with those products to, export. So just want to throw that out there to you. But as far as our export programs, I know Rob had mentioned the different products and services, but in order to get you ready to export, one of the major programs that we have right now is our Export Express program. And the Export Express program allows you to try to get funding before you're actually exporting. So this program is utilized to kind of prepare you for that. So if you need to change your website and in the language that you're going to be doing business in. So if you want to change it to Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, whatever the country you're going to be working with, by receiving these funds, you can utilize your Export Express loan for that. You can also start to change your brochures. You can set up your e-commerce site. So this, unlike a lot of programs, it's the developmental stages of exporting that you're getting prepared for. You can also utilize it to go to trade shows. And hopefully, once you've attended those trade shows and you get some sales from those, you can also utilize lines of credit to hopefully be able to fulfill those sales as well. So that Export Express program, and it's just recently been increased to $500,000. It originally was 350. Last year, when we set it up, it went to a max of $1 million during the high peak of COVID. But right now, it's now in a permanent allocation of $500,000 for the Export Express. And then we have our Export Working Capital program, as we call it, the EWCP, and that's more like transactional base or product based as far as maybe an actual transaction that you're looking at. So say, for instance, you're trying to do business in Japan and you actually have an invoice, you're trying to get funded, or you're looking to do a specific product or service there. That's more geared toward that actual transaction by using the Export Working Capital program. And mind you, these programs all have a 90% guarantee. So they're done through our lenders, whether they be banks or credit unions. They're going to get a higher guarantee than the majority of our programs. Now, currently, some of our programs have gone up to the 90%, but that's a pilot program at this time, and it'll probably go back down to the regular funding that they get for those programs as guarantees, like our Export Express. Our SBA Express will probably go back down to the 50%, but the export programs are permanently at the 90% guarantee. So that gives the banks incentive to finance to U.S. small businesses, and they have less of a risk when they're doing that. Our international trade program is more geared toward building your base here in Hawaii or whichever state you're located in. So for instance, if you want to set up, a shop here to purchase a location for manufacturing. I heard somebody on one of the chats had a manufacturing thing they were looking at to set up that space. And all of this is to make sure that you are able to do an operation that's going to build you up so you can do that work overseas. I know that Rob mentioned earlier, we normally do these when we have in-person workshops at the Foreign Trade Zone, and those of you are located there. But when you outgrow that trade zone and you're looking to possibly set up your own business location, you can utilize the International Trade Loan Program for that. And the one thing I will mention also is when you're looking to do transactions overseas, and I know we're talking about Japan today, and you might not run into these issues with Japan, but we encourage you to check what's called the country limitation schedule through Export-Import Bank, and they're a federal agency as well. And by checking that list, it will tell you which countries that the U.S. can do business in and which there are limits to, and which they won't allow any kind of financial transaction or business done in those countries. And if you choose to do that, you're going to be on your own. You won't have any backup from the U.S. government and can't get finance in those particular countries. So you want to always check the country limitation schedule. And if you go on Export-Import Bank's site, you'll find that schedule, and it changes randomly depending on the relationships. The other thing is we want you in preparation for, you always need a business plan. So even if you're an existing business and you've never done exporting before, you want to make sure that you get an export plan to put in place to add to that. And as far as all of our export programs, you can be in operation at least, we want you to see you in operation at least a year before applying for these programs. We can look at it on a case-by-case basis for startups, but usually there's a 1-year requirement. You don't necessarily have to have exported during that time, but we want you to at least be in operation domestically to, that shows that you can operate a business, and then we can start looking at doing business overseas. So I think, kind of just want to cut it off there. And if Rob has any questions, or if anybody has any questions they want to ask, feel free.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. Just to confirm, your email address is quite simple. It's mary.dale, D-A-L-E, at sba.gov, G-O-V, SBA, Small Business Administration. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to email Mary directly. I don't see any questions right now. Maybe there will be at the end. If you have time, you're more than welcome to stay until the end for Q&A. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending. We greatly appreciate your time. Our next speaker is Cindy Matsuki. She's at the Foreign Trade Zone at Pier 2. You've heard many of our speakers, including Mary just now, was mentioning the Foreign Trade Zone. And it's a great facility down at Pier 2, right across from Restaurant Row. I think a lot of our companies on Oahu don't even notice that the Foreign Trade Zone is there, but it's wonderful. And I will make Cindy a co-host. Okay. Another great reason I wanted to have Cindy speaking is that the Foreign Trade Zone here is also the local contact or agent for the Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank of the United States. And they have some fantastic credit insurance facilities that are available to small companies. Cindy, you're free to share your screen and proceed. And thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
We can.
Yeah, okay, great. So like Rob said, I think the Foreign Trade Zone gets a lot of coverage. When we were open, when you guys had in-person meetings, like a lot of people would come specifically for your workshops to the Foreign Trade Zone. And then they realize, hey, this place exists. So I really missed that. And I'm hoping that we can open that up soon.
Yeah, me too.
Because yeah, that was a really good way to help market our facility. And so to talk a little bit about the Exim Bank, as Rob said, we're kind of the Hawaii connection to Exim Bank. And it sounded like actually what Mary said, they have a similar program. But what Exim Bank does is they're not a bank, but they're the official credit agency of the United States. So they're a federal agency with the mission to support American jobs by helping with US companies exporting. So they kind of fill the gap where commercial lenders and private lenders won't finance some export projects. So what they do is, it's like buying regular insurance. They protect you against loss of payment for export sales. So they protect Hawaii exporters against non-payment due to commercial risks. And that includes if your buyer goes insolvent, or if they go bankrupt, or if they just don't pay. And they also protect against political risks, like if the country you're selling to goes into a war or has a revolution or any crazy stuff like that. They'll help protect against your loss if you sell to a company in a foreign country, like in Japan. But Japan seems like it's a really good customer for that. They also help you with your sales tools. They allow you to offer more competitive credit terms. So if your buyer doesn't want to do cash upfront payments, they'll allow you to offer credit. So generally they let you offer 180 days, which is even better than 30-day payment terms. And then they also said some products may even qualify for 360-day payment terms, but I don't know if you'd want to wait that long to get paid. I wouldn't, but I guess it's possible. And then also with this service that they provide, this credit insurance, the banks that they work with will allow you to borrow against the insured foreign receivables so that you're allowed to borrow more money from your lender. And basically, Exim Bank will assign the policy proceeds to the bank so that they're kind of guaranteed. And then Exim Bank covers up to 95% of your sales invoice, which is great. And they're really good to work with. There's no application fees or minimum premiums. They do have a one-time refundable advance deposit of $500 for the policy. And the premiums are paid within 30 days after the month of shipment. So that's after you ship your product. And I will include Greg Moore. He is the Hawaii representative. He represents the Western region, which includes Hawaii. And his contact info will be on my last slide. And so they're really great. And Greg is a really great guy. So please feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions about export financing. And as far as the foreign trade zone goes, we're a state agency and we administer a federal program for the foreign trade zone. And there are several benefits to taking advantage of the foreign trade zone. If you order your products in bulk, say you order a year's worth of product, if you are paying a high duty on your product, you can keep the bulk of it in the foreign trade zone and only pay as you withdraw product. So just you can pay the duties on whatever you take out of the zone. And that's because the foreign trade zone, the physical location is considered not within US customs. And so it's still considered like whatever's on the property is considered foreign. So that's how that works. And so if you are, say you're gonna sell something to Japan, but you're also importing part of your products and then you're pulling them together, if you do that within a foreign trade zone, the parts of your products that you import and whatever you do to it, and then you export it to Japan as a Hawaii company, you don't have to pay the duties on whatever you imported that went back out to another country. So that's another benefit. And the inverted tariff advantage is a little bit confusing, but it's more for manufacturers. So if you're importing different parts from different countries that come in at different tariff rates, some are say 5 to 7%, but in your manufacturing process, you're transforming all those parts into a different product and say this final product has a tariff rate of 1%. Once it leaves the zone and goes into US commerce, you will pay that 1% duty rate. So that's another benefit if you manufacture within a foreign trade zone. And then lastly, one of our more recent programs is that you can have a zone of your own, which is exciting. So the whole state of Hawaii is qualified to be designated as foreign trade zone. So you can make a portion of your facility or your whole facility a foreign trade zone and take advantages of the benefits I just mentioned. And there's other benefits as well of using the foreign trade zone, but those are the main ones that people use us for. And as Rob said, we're located right across Restaurant Row, and we have a large warehouse facility. So if you just need warehousing for your imported goods, we're a great place to be. We're close to town, and we have very competitive warehouse rates. So if that's all you need, then please feel free to reach out to us. So this is my contact information, and this is Greg Moore. He's the Exim Bank representative, and he's a great guy. Oh, I also wanted to mention that like Rob, I've been putting together a video library. I've been interviewing import and export companies, Hawaii companies, just to get, lessons learned and how they've grown their companies in Hawaii. So, and that's on our website, ftz9.org, as one of the resources. And I will give it back to you, Rob. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. I encourage our audience to arrange a tour of the foreign trade zone and just see how it could potentially help you, because it really is a wonderful facility. Anytime I talk to people on a neighbor island, though, about the foreign trade zone, they wonder, what about us on Maui? What about Hawaii or the Big Island? Do you have any comment on that?
So the Big Island, we actually do have a warehouse. It is designated foreign trade zone. It's not active yet, but that's available. And then, like I said, if you think you could take advantage, if you're paying a lot of high duties that you think you could benefit from having a foreign trade zone, we can help you walk through the process of making your facility on the neighbor island a foreign trade zone. Then you can take advantage of those benefits. So yeah, please
Great.
reach out to us.
Excellent. I also want to just spend one more minute on this export credit insurance through EXIM, because it's something that I use very frequently, and I find most of our Hawaii companies don't even know about it. And essentially what it does is allows you to buy a very inexpensive insurance policy that allows you to give credit terms, very favorable credit terms to your customers. Some of those customers you may not know very well, and it could actually be your first sale. And you're hesitant to maybe take, ship to the customer before you know them well. But the credit insurance will allow you to get that payment if for some reason, as you said, Cindy, the client defaults or for whatever reason cannot pay, then EXIM will reimburse you for that shipment. And so it's really wonderful. And all it really takes is a very simple credit application by the customer. It's not a very intrusive application. And then the EXIM folks will do a quick background check on that company and generally grant them 50 to 100,000 in credit insurance for you. So it's really a great program, and I encourage our Hawaii companies to take a bit more advantage of that. So thank you again, Cindy. Our next speaker is Keith Suzuki, and he's a prominent attorney here locally, who has done a lot of business in Japan. And I've asked him to speak today just to generally review what it's like to do business in Japan from a legal standpoint, what may be required from a Hawaii company in terms of contracts and what have you. That's always a big question. What do I do when I'm signing up a new distributor or an agent or what have you, and what are the legal ramifications of all of that? So I'd like to welcome you, Keith. Aloha. And I will call your company, your organization M4, because I just don't have the memory anymore to get all four of them correct. But you can explain to everybody what M4 is. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Actually, I'm not sure I can't even remember the 4 M's anymore, but they're basically the 4 name partners of my firm. McCorson is the first name, and after that, it gets kind of murky in my mind. So let's leave it. Thank you very much for having me. Sorry I don't have any slides, but I just thought I'd pass on some insights that I gained. I worked in Japan a total of about 16 years in Tokyo. And I guess the first thing that I wanted to say is that Japan really has changed tremendously over the time that I worked there. The last time was from 1999 to 2012. Or so. And so you know, it's the way things are done business-wise, the law, tremendous changes over the years. So what I'm going to be saying may not be 100% accurate now, but I think that fundamentally the observations I make are generally accurate. The first thing I'd like to say is that you have to get used to the idea that Japan is a country with prefectures, where the United States is a country with 50 states. That means that if you're trying to hire a lawyer in the United States, as you know, and you want to do business in a different state, then you got to hire a different lawyer. Because every lawyer is licensed in a particular jurisdiction. In Japan, it's one country. The laws are almost entirely, at least the ones that you normally will deal with, are at the national level. And so if you find a lawyer, he theoretically could service your needs anywhere in the nation, whether it be Hokkaido or Okinawa. That lawyer is licensed to practice law throughout the country. Very different from the United States. The other thing I sort of just wanted to point out, but I don't have enough time to go into the distinct differences, is that, in the world, there are three major types of laws. The UK and its progeny, the United States as well. We have a common law system, which I guess its distinctive feature is its precedents, judicial precedents, and the role of the courts. Japan is a civil law country, and then the third is a Sharia laws. But Japan is a civil law country, so its laws are much more along the lines of Germany or Italy, and most countries actually are civil law countries, which means just fundamentally the system of law is different between the United States and Japan. So if you could just kind of keep that in mind. Contracts, you will find as a general rule, are shorter and simpler, and probably to your chagrin, probably a little bit too vague for your comfort level. It's changed over the time, and in the big international transactions and things, a purchase agreement could be 300 pages, just as it is in the United States. But at least fundamentally, Japanese contracts tend to be shorter, vaguer, and more flexible, which means that there's usually a little provision at the end that says something like, if there's a disagreement, the parties shall discuss in good faith and work it out. And this is a very standard provision in a Japanese contract. I guess the last thing I wanted to point out is not so much Japanese law, but it's more sort of just the difference in negotiation style between Japanese companies, again, very general statements, but Japanese companies and American companies in particular. Americans have a way of sort of respecting and idealizing individualism, and the kind of the image of the American negotiator in Japan is they're independent, they rely on their brains and logic and reasoning, and they can't believe when their logic, which is impeccable, sort of leads to just one conclusion, their conclusion, and therefore that how can anybody not agree with that type of thinking? Americans sort of want a fast response at the table. They want to be negotiating with people who have the authority to make decisions quickly, and they want to convince people with their skills of negotiation and logic. Japanese are very different as a general rule. Japanese are much more group oriented. They do not make decisions at the negotiation table as a general rule. Nobody at the Japanese table needs to sort of be a superstar. They're part of a team, and the company and the team wins. But yeah, if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. In Japan is an island country. People kind of they're forced to get along and work together, and so they're not going to have the strong type of individualism that the United States has. But I guess the other thing I wanted to sort of point out to you is that Japan's lifetime employment system, while it's changed a heck of a lot since the Japanese bubble collapsed and now, it still is fundamentally there, a lot more than it is in the United States, where it doesn't exist pretty much at all. So if you think about the people that you're negotiating this way, the people there have joined the company right out of school, possibly, likely, and this is the one place that they're going to work for the rest of their lives. These are people they have to get along with. These are people that are part of an organization, and they're going to be making decisions slowly. But when they make decisions, it's sort of made by all appropriate decision maker and stakeholders in the organization, the accounting guys, the engineers, the lawyers. Everybody is sort of following along through the dingy system, and otherwise to sign off on the final deal, which makes the decision-making process very slow and frustrates the heck out of the American negotiators. But I actually found that in the end, when a decision is made by a Japanese company, that decision has been bought by everyone who's supposed to have signed off on it. And so they don't change their minds, they don't back out very easily, and they do not, and they implement very quickly because everybody's sort of been brought along the way. Sometimes Americans have a way of cutting deals and then finding out that, gee, you know, we didn't really think about the marketing aspect or the technology aspect, and it can really lead to sort of renegotiating things that have already been discussed. So in general, just to summarize and end here, when you're dealing with Japanese companies, be prepared for it to take longer. But once you have a deal, you've probably got a pretty solid deal. On the other hand, Americans tend to sometimes make deals at the table very quickly, but then find themselves having to sort of renegotiate things, but they like to move very quickly. These are just sort of very rough observations. People may disagree with my observations, but over time, those are just general conclusions that I kind of reached on my own. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. Wonderful. I put your contact information up here.
Oh, thank you very much.
Anybody wants to reach out to you directly. One of the questions that we'll get very often is, when is the right time for a contract between the small Hawaii company and a Japanese distributor or a representative there? Do you have any comment on that?
I think I'm going to apologize and say I'm dodging your question completely right away. But
you are an attorney after all, so
let me answer it from a different angle. I find that just in negotiating deals, it especially when it comes to things between Japan and America, start with a letter of intent or some kind of MOU or something like that, and get your major points down almost in an outline form instead of trying to put a full-blown contract together. It sort of helps you narrow down exactly where the issues are, and helps you work through the major things. The rest of it, the flesh, that it can be added to the bones later on. And yeah, a lot of times the devil is in the details. But I find that, especially with Japanese company, if you kind of can get down to the major points first and get agreement there, or 90% agreement there, and then work on the agreement, that's probably a more efficient way of doing things.
Can that letter of intent be in English?
Yes. You know, most you do get into a lot of arguments sometimes about the governing language. But anybody who is doing stuff from Hawaii, I would highly recommend that you insist upon the governing language being English. Their translations, and I know there's another speaker who's going to be talking about bilingual websites and stuff, but translations are rarely capture all the nuances of things. And when you're in a court, you know, language precision is tremendously important, and being in your language and having the judge understand the nuances of that you intended probably tremendously important.
Great. There's one quick question came in for you. How do you balance building relationships and trust versus legal and contractual formalities?
That is an excellent question. I'm sorry, I really don't have a great answer for that. Obviously, both are tremendously important, but maybe I can just add again. I'm dodging the question, but add this. You know, flexibility is tremendously important, and you know, Americans tend to want long, detailed contracts. As I said, Japanese tend to like more shorter, flexible ones. Trying to strike a balance that shows flexibility probably will go a long way to help you earn some credit in the trust and relationship building side of things, and not always insisting on doing it the American way, while making sure that your document is accurate and other things is probably a good step in the right direction.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Keith. We greatly appreciate your expertise. And if anyone in our audience has any further legal questions, please contact Keith directly. Our next speaker is Brian Suzuki from Hawaii Air Cargo. And Brian has been in the logistics business for many decades and is probably the foremost expert in the islands about shipping product to Japan or elsewhere. As the name of his company implies, Hawaii Air Cargo, the bulk of his shipments are by air, which are what mostly our small companies are going to be using. So with that, I'd like to bring in Brian, and I'm also going to share his presentation and run it for him. So Brian, if you could, please tell me when to change slides.
Okay, you can go to this. Okay, that's good. Go ahead. Thank you. And that's very kind of you to say I've been in for decades, just trying to say that I'm an old guy. And I have been I've been in the industry since the 60s. So I am an old guy. So at any rate, going to Japan from Hawaii, I've had a lot of shipments, and I'll go through them all, but I'll try to make it real quick. Right now, you can go by ocean or by air. Ocean freight, unfortunately, we don't have any direct sailings to Japan. They either have to go through, say, Kaohsiung in Taiwan or through the West Coast. So, and then to get the benefit, you gotta ship full container loads. And whereas a lot of people don't ship full container loads for different reasons. So we use air the most. So the next slide, and with air, we have different ways. Besides the airlines and the freight forwarders, you have UPS, FedEx, and the post office. They're all very good ways of shipping. The thing is that each one has its own peculiar different ways. And so for you, this is a whole new class or another class you have to take to learn about it. And Rob, we've had classes on logistics, exporting, shipping, getting your products to market in the past, but it'll take a half a day to explain everything. Next slide. Okay, we use the bellies of passenger flights for the main point, but you know, during pre-COVID-19, during the peak travel season between Japan and Hawaii, we had 21 daily flights from Japan, different cities, of course, from all the way up north, Hokkaido down to Fukuoka. But The airlines, we had about 8 carriers. Some of them had 2, 3 flights a day. But next slide, we have today, we have only 1 daily. Of course, with the 1 daily, which is Hawaiian Air, they've been very good. We've been using them all the time, but we also have not daily. JL has twice a month flights. It's really hard to book it on that flight because we're not sure when they're going to fly. The other side is All Nippon Airways. They have 2 flights also in a month, but they don't even have the office is closed, so you can't work with their sales staff. On the other end, next slide. Can you next slide, please? Okay, I'm going to tell you some of the selling points, the reason why, and again, I'm going to remind you at the end, this is a very difficult thing because people in Japan, when they buy something from here, they like the product, but then they say, you're so far away, shipping must be very expensive. But I tell you this, it's hard to explain to them, but we have all these big wide body flights and we have passengers that pay for everything above, but below deck, it's pretty much empty, just a little baggage. So cargo space is available, and with all the different airlines vying for cargo, they end up discounting flight pricing. The air cargo industry in the US is not regulated. And because of that, you should shop around for rates. And also you should beware because there are different ways of calculating rates. And therefore it's a buyer beware market. So shop around and get the price down right. But this is a selling point. Going to Japan costs only 1/3 of what the price of shipping something to Hawaii from Japan. Japan is somewhat regulated, but because we're not regulated and we have all the belly space, price is cheap. And I've had a customer tell me, don't tell my competitors that I'm buying from Hawaii. I said, who are your customers? I want to sell them, our services. But because when he gets it, he says, oh, the freight rate is cheap. And right now, would you believe it or not, even with that 1 flight a day going to Japan, it is cheaper per pound, not per kilo, well, per kilo or per pound, cheaper to Tokyo than from here to LA. Hard to believe, but because there's no freight going, meanwhile, we do have a lot of freight going back to the mainland. And of course, we don't have as many flights. But that's a selling point, but it's hard to convince someone in Japan that it's going to be cheaper. Okay, next slide. Okay, again, as the Consul General mentioned, we have all these shipments, and we're still shipping papaya, pineapple, macadamia nut candies, and a lot of cookies are going up there now. We used to ship a lot of potted plants and bare root plants. It's kind of slowed down. Cut flowers has slowed down because we're having a hard time competing with Amsterdam and Australia. They're shipping a lot of amphibians from those places. And because a lot of the amphibian nurseries, or flower nurseries in Amsterdam, they're subsidized by the government. And and that's another story, but that's why we're having a hard time. Although it was successful in the past, we also still ship fresh tuna fish. Honey is still a hot commodity, but they're limited. They cannot bring in as much. So as much as they can order, we've been shipping it. Surfboards, coffee, green beans for those that want to roast their own and blend their own. And also we have roasted coffee that's going up there. Something new is rum. Rum is being shipped up. And then we still have wearing apparel, long shirts, footwear. We're having tons of slippers and sandals going up there from a local manufacturer. And again, next slide. I'm trying to say that with the experience, we have always been able to get things in. Another thing is, as mentioned before by the Consul General, we've had a very good relationship with Japan. The U.S. Consulate in Tokyo, I've been working with that office more than the Osaka office. For whatever reason, because I go to Tokyo more often. But the APHIS office, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, helps on agricultural products get into Japan. And we've gotten a lot of assistance in some of the technical things. And when we get something that's stuck in ag inspection, which Japan's ag. For instance, I had a shipment going to Okinawa, and it wasn't so. It was supposed to go from Honolulu to Taipei, Okinawa, just to get away from the exchange or transfers in Japan. But the flight had a mechanical in Tokyo. It didn't go on to Taipei, so they took off the plane, the plans that we had, and the ag inspection didn't need to check it because it's not going to stay in Tokyo. But he checked on it and he put a halt on it. But basically, it was made so that they'll get into Okinawa, and he wanted to do all kinds of stuff with it. But I talked to the APHIS office, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service office in Tokyo, and they worked with their counterparts in the Tokyo government and got them to, okay it and release the shipment. But that's the kind of stuff we have problems. We always have people in our U.S. consulate office, commercial service, willing to help. Next slide. Again, I mentioned a big selling point, DBED, Department of Agriculture, make sure you work with them, and the U.S. Commercial Service and the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. They're all very good connections, and with them, you get a lot of information and a lot of help, both financial and anyway, you have to do that. It's just important that they have a lot of things. Next slide. Attend trade shows. Like was mentioned about the Hankyu show in Osaka. We ship a lot of different samples to Osaka for that show. But FoodX in Japan and Tokyo, and also Tokyo International Gift Show. And like I say, our state government subsidized. They pay me to consolidate all the shipment of my company. We ship it to the shows, and it's paid for by, DBED or DOA, and you get the shipment shipped up there. And there's a lot of other benefits too going on with that. Even if you don't attend the show, they can assist, have somebody there trying to sell your product. So it's good to not only attend the show, but to work with our state people. Next slide, please. This is the FoodX Japan, and Hawaii has a booth right in there. Next slide. And this is the Tokyo International Gift Show. And this also, it's for, if you have a product you like to sell, you can also find out who you're competing against, who else is selling similar product. So going to these shows are just terrific, very, very worthwhile. And we used to get subsidized even the flights and the hotel. When I say we, as an American, you fly an American flight to Japan, we get some money back from our government or our funding that we get. So always look into that. I had a guy that after he flew back and he wanted to get credit for flying, but he flew on a JL flight. I said, you got to fly on an American flight, you're going to get American government money. Okay, anyway, I can go on and on, but I'm going to just give you some stories. This is Anthurium nursery in Hilo, and there's a couple in the background there, and they came from Tokyo, and they're representing a company in there that wanted to buy small bouquets of 3 flowers and 1 leaf, or 4 flowers and 2 leaves, or something. And they wanted to have small little bouquets. And then so we did a pricing with the Greenwood nursery people, and we sent samples to Japan. They took them back with them and came back, they wanted it. The problem was they wanted 10,000 bouquets a week, and then we couldn't afford that. But the company was Japan's 7-Eleven stores. They said, we had 160 some odd stores in Tokyo. I can't give some and not give the others. They wanted everybody. So that was a lost cause because we just couldn't supply the demand on that. Next slide. Okay, this is another third show, and on the if you look under www.nagopine.com, and that is an English version, but the left-hand side photograph is in Hilo, and from Pavilions, Hawaii. They're taking off all the roots, cleaning it as best as they have to clean it really good so there are no bugs. But then, back in the year 2000, 3 officials from this back again, 3 officials from the Nago Pineapple Company came on a golf outing with the travel agency because Nago Pineapple Park is a tourist destination mainly for the Japanese tourists who go to Okinawa and visit. But they only had pineapple fields. And it got pretty boring looking at pineapple fields. So they wanted to come in. So they came to Honolulu, went to the Department of Ag and asked, they wanted to find other bromeliads, which is in the same family as the pineapple. They couldn't speak, there was nobody to speak Japanese and we didn't speak English. So fortunately they called me and I went down right away. I speak little Japanese and then it ended up, I took them to Bromeliads Hawaiian Hilo. And when they saw that, they said, okay, we want 2,000 plants right away. And they said, oh, to clean everything else up, to get as many plants, we need to let it take 4 months, which they did. After they got there, and then they said, okay, send us another 3,000 plants. They bought all those things, and today we shipped over 10,000 plants in a matter of 5 years. But the park became very colorful because of, you're getting ahead of me, but it got so colorful now that if you go to the website, you'll see how colorful it is. You see all the colors in the park. You're riding on a small cart that's self-propelled and it's got a recording on it. But then they invited us after the second shipment. They invited the hybridizer, David Sheeby and myself, to come up there to help name. We had all the names on the plants, but when we unpacked it, unwrapped it, the thing fell out. We couldn't tell the customers the names of those plants. So we went and spent 3 days in labeling all those plants in the blanket. It's okay. Anyway, that was just a chance that came up with. It was that shipper sold a lot of plants, over 10,000, and you got to think that each plant cost them about $7 to $10 each, depending on the size. But it became a big hit for Nago Pineapple Park. So nagopine.com and /en for English / Okay, next slide. Another thing that we started to do is shipping potted plants to Japan. We got our animal plant health inspection people to approve sterile media from Hilo. It's volcanic cinder with some heat loss. And because it was heated up to a certain temperature, it was free of any disease or bugs. And then it was, we had all these palms, different types of palms, but the biggest seller was Racina Mexico. And because it's kind of tight. And that plant you see on the left side of your screen, in Japan, if you were to buy it, they had them in Japan, it cost $150 to buy it there. But then nobody could take it on the subway or a car, so again, it's only 4 feet tall, but they would have it delivered and charge me $50 to deliver it. We were able to ship that plant to Japan, a 4-foot high plant, and the total cost for the product and the air shipment, not including customs clearance and delivery, it cost $40. So the customer there liked it. And the beauty of the whole thing is the plant's grown in Hawaii. The root, in the pot, the pot is root bound, and that plant will last almost forever, like that. The plants that are grown in Japan, because of the sunlight is weaker, there's very little root structure. And I went to a nursery that sold those plants, and I see them putting styrofoam wedges to prop up those canes to make it stand up straight. And I happened to bump into one, and it fell. The root was just like a closed fist, the bottom of the thing. There were no root hairs. And yet, after 6 months, the ones grown in Japan, the leaves would fall off because they needed more root structure. 5 years after we donated plants to American Embassy in Tokyo, we donated to several auction houses throughout Tokyo, and the one in Nagoya, we gave them 5 plants. 5 years later, I went to visit them. The same plant that I gave them, they looked and said, it's the same thing. It hasn't changed. And all they did was water the plant. Other than that, they didn't do anything to it. But that's the good plants from Hawaii. But unfortunately, this was just before the big fuel price jump. So at any rate, now they don't ship as much. The other, again, a reminder, a hardest thing to convince your prospective customers to buy Hawaiian products is to explain them that the shipping here, air cargo is cheaper. It's not expensive. Also, another thing to remember that shipments have to be prepaid, meaning we can make arrangements with the airlines here and we pay it on this side. If we ship something to a freight collect, when we ship it freight collect, we have to also pay the full tariff rate and a collect charge. So by paying it prepaid over here, we can do that. I have one Japanese customer that ships a couple of times a month from here, and he wants us to collect from different suppliers. So we pick it up. He makes the invoice from there using one of the suppliers here. But when we ship, he sends us his credit card and approval to bill his credit card. So that's prepaid the shipment. So you can go forward. Next slide. It's just coming in. I have some questions, and you can leave the last slide on because it has my contact. But like I say, air freight is, but it's very easy, but at the same time, it's the last thing that people think about when they sell their products. It'll be to your advantage when you go to these trade shows. Keep in mind what it will cost to send, it's 100 pieces or 1,000 pieces, whatever, freight-wise, so that you can include that freight charges into your selling price and get the best rate. So, any
Brian,
questions?
there's one question that came in on, I think it's this slide here, towards the beginning. I have to reshare the screen so you can see it. Where there's an asterisk next to papaya pineapple, what does the asterisk mean?
Oh, that means that we're still shipping it to this day. Yeah, it's being shipped today. The ones without the asterisk, not as much. And and again, when you ship, don't forget some products can be perishable, like chocolate candy. I ship for almost all the chocolate candy manufacturers in the island because it'll melt if it's left out in the ramp here at Honolulu International Airport. On the other hand,
that's an important topic. Shipping some of our products that ship from here, including candles and sunscreens and chocolate and what have you, it needs to be protected from the heat or extreme temperature changes. And you can advise the client on that activity, right?
Oh yeah, and it's important, like in Korea, to go to Incheon Airport. Wintertime, it's freezing cold, and the chocolates would freeze. On the other hand, if you set summertime, it gets into 100 degrees, and it'll melt. And from the plane side to the cargo terminal, the drive is almost 20 minutes. So we have to have a special runner, pick it up from the plane side and take it right back into the with a tug. But they have to take it right away. They can't be waiting around, otherwise it'll melt. We've been very, very careful on everything we ship. And after one accident we had years ago with one of the airlines, they left it out at the ramp before the plane was even hadn't even arrived yet in Honolulu. But they took it out early. Somebody took it out, and then it just melted. But the airlines don't pay claims like that. I had to pay the chocolate company the payment. It was a little over $10,000 worth of chocolate that melted. But because of that, all the chocolate people would pay me a few cents a pound more just because they know that we take care of their product.
Right. Now, one of the things I strongly advise our companies here before they start working in Japan or any other country is to meet with Brian and show him your product and what you're trying to accomplish, what you're selling and where you're shipping it to. And he can advise you on your packaging and what have you. It's very important to figure this stuff out ahead of time, rather than once you've already sent or shipped the product or getting ready to ship the product. Know these things ahead of time because it'll greatly impact your margin on that particular sale. Okay, great. We're running a little bit behind, so I have to move on. There's some questions coming in, but I'll get to them at the very end. Our next speaker is Kanzo Nara from the Imagine Web Creation Company here in Honolulu. His expertise is building bilingual websites and working with companies to develop search engine optimization, search engine marketing, and what have you. A lot of that has to do with exporting, because companies are coming to the websites and buying product or getting information about the product. And whenever we have an e-commerce related webinar, Hanzo is the person I call first to help me discuss those types of topics. At the beginning of our webinar today, I showed you our YouTube archive for the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, and there's a few videos on there with Hanzo's longer presentation than unfortunately we're allowed to do today at just 10 minutes. But I think it's important just to get Hanzo's basic information out there and his contact information, so that if you are in need of a bilingual website, you know somebody to contact. So with that, I'll invite Hanzo to jump in and begin.
Hi, thank you, Rob. Once again, my name is Kanzo Nara. I'm from Imagine Web Creation, and today I will be talking about making a bilingual website. Okay, first thing to keep in mind when making a bilingual website is what language you're going to be doing and what region you're going to be doing. So we have to think about this in two aspects, the multilingual and the multi-regional. So is it a Japanese site for Japanese in Japan, or is it a Japanese site, let's say, for Japanese living in England, or even here in Hawaii? This will determine what type of domain you will have to get. Many of the clients that come to me have already skipped this deliberation process and have a mirror site. So it is very important to determine what type of domain you need to purchase to get started. You basically have three choices here. You can go with the traditional .com or the .co.jp, or you can use subdomains, which is jp.yourdomain.com. Okay, so a couple of the pros and cons of setting up a multi-regional URL. The first one is a country-specific domain, the first one, which will be example.jp. You need to be careful when going this route, because whatever domain that has a .jp or even .us, it has what's called geo-targeting, which means your website will be targeted for a specific country. So if you're looking for, let's say, example.jp here in Hawaii, you probably won't find it on the search engines, because what the .jp tells the search engines is this website is for Japanese people only in Japan. So you don't want to use JP just because it looks cool or it looks fancy. You want to use this in a very specific way. So companies that usually have different pricing for different companies, automotive companies use this type of domain because they're even the same car like a Toyota Corolla will cost different here in the US than in Japan. So they have geo-targeted websites to determine what price and what information to show who. The second one is a subdomain, which is you can add whatever information you want to add before your domain. So in this case, it'll be jp.example.com. This is probably the most easiest way to set up, and you can use your same hosting. And this tells search engines that while it's a .com, anybody can search for it. There is a different website within a website that has a different language. So the search engines can determine what language to display when people put in the specific keywords. The third one, this one is the most common mistake that most people go with just because it's easy and cheap. This is basically just adding more pages within your website that's Japanese. This is not a good way to go. The reason is you have two languages within one website, and your website ultimately will not be found by search engines. The dominant language will be the primary one recognized. on the search engine. So you do not want to make a website during this one. I really can't emphasize this stronger. If you do this, you save time and money, but actually you're just wasting your time and money doing this in the first place. So you want to be very careful in this section. Okay, so once we've determined who your website's for and what language is for and what region is for, we're going to be going into the design portion. Okay, few key elements about Japanese web design is very heavy content. There's a lot more content information, package deals, seasonal promotions. Japanese don't like searching for products that they're looking for. They want to be told what the trends are, what's popular, what deals are available. The second part is banner ads. These are basically graphic ads that go inside a website. So it's a lot of companies use this, and it's basically kind of like advertising within your website for your own products. Okay, we like to go look at a couple example websites. This is the US Pizza Hut website. As you can see here, it's pretty straightforward. You have your header navigation here, one promotion here, and you can start your order. One more example. This is Pizza Hut in Saudi Arabia. Once again, very simple. You can just start your order by clicking here on the red section. Okay, now we're looking at Pizza Hut in Japan. There's a whole lot of information happening here. We have a side navigation, promotionals in the middle, header navigation. You can log in to become a member. They have seasonal menus, new menus, popular menus, and it's really hard to find even where to order your pizza. But Japanese websites, many of them are like this because they want to spoon feed information for you. They don't want you to build your own pizza, actually. They want you to buy what's pre-made already. And this is a pretty common among any type of website in Japan. Okay, so once you have a Japanese website, the third portion will be marketing the website in Japan. This is average spending per year for each country and how much consumers spend annually on e-commerce shopping. As you can see, Japan is in the top 10, and the average consumer spends about $968 per year online. The types of marketing is the same in Japan. Pay-per-click advertising, search engine optimization, and social network media. Okay, sorry, going back to this one. There's one point I want to emphasize here is business blogs. Japanese are very, very big bloggers. Believe it or not, 32% of all blogs in the world are in the Japanese language. So if you have a website, you definitely want to add a feature where you add Japanese blogs to attract new customers. Okay, keywords in Japanese. This goes into the language portion of Japanese itself. There's three types of alphabets when it comes to Japanese. You have kanji, which is the one here, hiragana, and then katakana. So even if you have a translation of your website, if you're not using these three alphabets the correct way, your website or web page won't get searched by Japanese consumers. So very important when you're looking for a bilingual web designer is you want to find somebody who is proficient in the written language as well, not just speak bilingual Japanese. You want them to read and write Japanese the same way. Okay, pay-per-click and SEM in Japan is it's a lot different than here in the US because people use the internet in different ways, and a lot of Japanese companies are a lot more strict of what websites you can view or not view during work time. They even restrict, if you can have your smartphone out or not. So it tends to focus on when the consumer is free, so in transit or so not, lunch breaks and so on. And it's also important to remember that in Japan, when we think of Japan, we think of Tokyo and Osaka, which is, huge metropolitan area, but that actually only counts for about 1/5 of the population. The other are more in the countryside. So depending on that, they're looking for different products, or they're looking for, they view the websites at different times of the day. Okay, the next one is social media in Japan versus, the global aspect. We like to think Facebook and Twitter is big and everybody uses that, but before you start jumping in and doing all your social media in one platform, you want to find out what's popular in Japan. As of 2020, the #1 app in Japan for social media is Line. The second one is Twitter, and then Instagram. Facebook is at #4. So it's very different than what we consider social media here in the US. You just want to find out which platform you want to get started with. Okay, 83% of all first searches done on your smartphone. So keeping that in mind, people are going to find your website on a smartphone first. So when are they looking for you, and where are they when they're searching for you on a smartphone? These are the 3 main places they're going to be doing this. In transit, and I know this is a plane, but most of the time this means commuting to work. And Japan, as you know, has a great public transportation system that many people rely on a daily basis. And average, let's say, salaryman in Japan might commute 45 minutes to an hour one way every day. So what they do is they tend to browse the web during this time. Second time is lunch breaks at work. And the very last one, this is the golden time when the actual conversions happen to your website, meaning sales happen to your website, is in the evening from around 7 p.m. to about 10 p.m. Okay, so people are looking for your website, and let's say they do find your website. This is important to know that you only have 2 seconds to grab their attention. So that's very, very short time frame. And then next, with the smartphone era, it needs to be within 2 swipes. So if they type in the correct keyword, they land to your page. Whatever sales pitch you're going to have on your web page needs to happen within 2 swipes. So your consumers are busy and they have very, very short attention spans. Okay, I'm going to go through this section a little bit fast. These are a few of the things we can expect in the future for e-commerce. One of them is fulfillment centers, currency converters. Fulfillment centers are getting big in Japan too. I think somebody already talked about this today. Even companies like Kuroneko Yamato have fulfillment centers that you can contract if you're a Japanese company, which drastically changes your shipping time and price. Currency converters. These are helpful resources to have on your website. People are pretty comfortable buying things in US dollars because they have a general sense of how much $1 is based on their currency. But it's nice to add this, especially if you're going into the higher end price products. If it's over $100, it's nice to have these currency converters, so the consumer knows, how much they're spending in their own currency easier. Language support is a very big part too. So depending on how much traffic you get, you might want to invest in this infrastructure to be able to take care of these bilingual needs. First, you'll need a bilingual staff, obviously bilingual website, extensive frequently asked questions in Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. You can add things like a chat feature so people can ask questions real time and so on. Some of the trends that's been happening in 2021 is multimedia experience. We're spending a lot more time online right now compared to 2019. We were spending about 3.5 hours a day looking at the internet. Today, we're up to 8.2 hours. So everybody is looking at the internet more often, which means you can show more content, you can show more video content, you can have more multimedia experiences for your users. So this is a good trend that is happening now. This part is completing a transaction. A lot of times we make a website and it says, for further information, please contact us. A lot of times users, they want to get everything done online. So you can create things like, an appointment booking system, online payment options for consulting, reminder tags. You want to come up with a transaction flow of what the final goal is for your customer and try to make your website so you can fulfill the goal of your consumer. Design trends have been changing a lot. So contrary to like a fancy design with a lot of background happening, what was popular in Hawaii some years ago for the Japanese market was having wavy lines in the background or hibiscuses in the corner of the website. But now we're looking at smartphones and we have less time and less space to show off these things. So websites are becoming a lot more simpler and a lot more impact-based. Few ways you can do this is by scrollytelling, which is your website is a long story. Colorless design is also popular. You see a lot more black and white based simple websites these days. Video marketing is a booming industry now. It has grown exponentially during 2020 and continues to grow today. So if you want to advertise your site, you can easily start off on YouTube, and you can localize them for, let's say, YouTube in Japan, or YouTube just for Hokkaido or just Tokyo. You can be very localized on what products you want to show and show your videos on specific audiences. This is some data on newer, faster growing YouTube demographics. The largest growing ones right now are the baby boomers. And they've been checking out YouTube a lot more these days, which is interesting. Some of the reasons they're going to YouTube now is to embrace nostalgia. They like to watch the news on YouTube now. So it's not so much just kind of cute kittens and sneezing pandas on YouTube anymore. A lot of people are finally realizing that YouTube does have hard, solid content that people want to revisit. Thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation on bilingual websites.
Great. Thank you so much again, Kanzo. Again, I refer our audience back to our YouTube channel and look at some of our recent videos on e-commerce in Japan, and you'll see the much longer version, much more detailed version of this. And again, thanks always to Kanzo, who is extremely helpful to us and always joins our webinars when I ask him to. So thanks, and contact him with any questions about bilingual websites. With that, I'm going to move on. We're staying a bit in the e-commerce realm, this time a bit more from the Japan side. And we have Mark Quody from Big Picture International. Mark, I'm going to make you a co-host. Just 1 second, please. And please begin and tell us about Big Picture International and what you're doing in Japan.
Thank you, Rob. Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Okay, great. Well, it's my pleasure to be part of this very, very informative and hopefully useful program. I'm a huge fan of Hawaii. I'm an American from New Jersey. And I'm looking at envy with those of you in Hawaii with even your virtual backgrounds, because I know even though they're virtual on this call, you have them in real life. So yeah, good on you for that. Okay, so basically we're going to talk about market entry to Japan via e-commerce, but specifically on the major marketplaces. As Kanzo worked on, he's focused on the website as a means of getting your brand or your company or your products into Japan. In this case, we look specifically at the major marketplaces, and I'll talk to you about Amazon Japan, Rakuten Ichiba, and Yahoo Shopping. Okay, I'm going to bang through some of these slides. As Rob mentioned, you'll get this deck, so I'm not going to focus on a lot of the data or the details. I want to get to as much of the information part as possible. But there's a lot of reasons to be trading on e-commerce in Japan. It's a huge market here, almost $200 billion in total. It's growing quite actively. I think some of the data showed maybe the 2019 to 2020 growth was around 20 or 25%, which is huge. But there's a lot of room for growth, and more Japanese consumers are feeling comfortable and confident in the process of online shopping. I mentioned the three major e-commerce platforms or marketplaces. The fact is they account for about 60% of total market share in the entire e-commerce sector in Japan. And probably even more importantly, 100% of consumer coverage. In other words, if you're trading on Amazon alone, you probably reach about 60% of all online users. If you trade on Rakuten alone, you're probably reaching more like 80 or 90%. If you're trading on all three of them, you're pretty much at 99.9% of all online shoppers in Japan. So it's a really excellent way to reach the broad market. And I certainly recommend to a lot of my clients that starting there is the most efficient way to go. Okay, in terms of market entry, there are three ways. And you've heard a little bit about this in terms of maybe cross-border shipping. Basically, you can set up your own accounts. Amazon Japan has made it tremendously easy for a merchant with a Seller Central account in the United States, for example, trade anywhere else in the world that Amazon is operating in. For Rakuten, it's a little more complicated. They certainly don't have a lot of markets around the world to trade on. But in this case, your key interest is going to be, as an American company, how can you trade in addition to Amazon on Rakuten and Yahoo? And the reason for that basically is any incremental costs for you to move from one platform to the other usually are a small percentage of the incremental sales revenue that you'll get by trading on multiple platforms. But the first option for you is to trade cross-border. You basically set up your Amazon Japan account. As an American company, you're able to set up an account on Rakuten yourselves. It's difficult to operate because everything's in Japanese and it's a very complicated marketplace, but that's where companies like mine come in. We work with a lot of American companies that can set up their own account, but need an agent like ours to operate the business on their behalf. Yahoo does not allow any overseas companies to open an account. So the only way you can trade on Yahoo is either to start a company here or use an agent like my company. So you can start with cross-border. The good news about that is your investment and your risk is actually quite low. Your inventory is in the United States. You only ship products that somebody has already purchased. And you can kind of minimize the amount of in-country expenses that you have. A lot of them are still there. You still have to pay monthly operating fees. You still have to design and develop some type of storefront or product listings for your clients, for your customers. You have to do marketing. So all of those costs are still there, but the cost of using an agent, for example, might be less. The cost of shipping product here and maintaining it in a warehouse obviously doesn't exist. So that's option number one. It's a good place to start. Proof of concept, you know that you have customers here that want your products, and then perhaps you can move on to a more significant investment and a higher risk profile, but also a higher return profile by having a local operation here. So that option exists with Amazon quite well as well. FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon, you might be familiar with it. They basically will take your inventory, put it in their warehouse, and basically sell on your behalf. So that's a great service. They won't, just to let you know, they won't act as the importer of record, or they won't act as the customs clearance agent. You'll still need those intermediaries in there, but they basically will allow you to ship product here and sell on your behalf. For Rakuten, you do have a similar option. It's not quite as compelling as FBA. It would take me too long to explain why that is true. But basically, agents like me have warehouses. We have a warehouse in Tokyo. We have a warehouse in Osaka. The product is kept there. It tends to be a very low-cost option, much lower cost than storing all of your products in Amazon, for example. Store it in a local warehouse. When Amazon products need replenishment, we send to Amazon, and our warehouse typically delivers directly to Rakuten or Yahoo or a local website, for example. The third option is for you to actually come here physically, set up a company. It's not that difficult to do, but typically this is the last part of a long process where a company has, well, we have a great business in Japan. We want to expand into offline. We want to invest more into the country. And then of course you can set up your own local operations. To the point that Kanzo mentioned, mobile commerce is now 60, I think it's probably close to 70% of all sales. So being able to optimize not only your website if you develop one, but your storefronts for mobile are essential. Okay, this might look scary, but it actually is quite simple. This is an example of a cross-border business model and the key elements that are part of this process. You can see the overseas seller on the left, a service provider if you use one, the marketplace in the middle, and then the Japanese consumer. So in this model, it's actually quite simple. You set up your account, you set up your product listings on Amazon, you set up your storefront on Rakuten, you market to the consumer. There are well over 100 million unique users on those two marketplaces alone. So like I said earlier, you cover just about everyone. You start doing some marketing, you start getting some interest. The order gets placed directly with the marketplace. That information is sent back to your office, either electronically or some other way. And then you fulfill the order directly to the consumer. So it really is that easy. We do this routinely and it works. It's a very good business model that allows even some market entry, even some early entry and even some smaller SME companies to participate in the process. This just talks about the popularity of product categories. I'm sure you'll find your product on one of these. And the beautiful thing is the categories are almost the same. There's very little difference between what an American or a European or a Japanese consumer buys online. Of course, there's some variance, but generally not. Within the category, will a Japanese person purchase an international product versus a Japanese product? That, of course, is a different question. But if your prices are competitive and or you have unique product that a Japanese consumer is seeking, and I would argue, along with one of the earlier comments, that the Hawaiian brand is actually quite strong, that you have a very good opportunity to attract Japanese consumers to your products in your store. Won't talk too much about Japanese consumers, except that they're famously and notoriously demanding, but very affluent and also very loyal. We've seen in some cases for some of our clients over 25% repeat order rates, which of course is the holy grail of all selling, where you keep getting the same consumer to buy over and over again without having to spend any marketing to get them. These is reasons why Japanese are skeptical about international purchases. So the cross-border model, I mean, it has its downsides. It's more expensive for the consumer. They have to pay international shipping. It takes time. And they're skeptical, what about a return? Or what if I need to talk to somebody? So you have to make sure that you have some type of customer service or agent service here that is able to say, no, we have a domestic return service. We have a domestic customer service that will support you. Okay, the three markets, Amazon, Japan, Rakuten Ichiba, and Yahoo Shopping. Amazon, you'll be most familiar with in all probability, is product-centric for the most part. Unless you're a big brand, you won't have a brand registry, you won't have a storefront of your own, but you'll have a lot of product listings. And they need to be Japanized, they need to be localized in Japanese language, and you're ready to go. That's pretty much it for getting up and running on Amazon if you already have a Seller Central account. For Rakuten, it's a bit more complicated. You have to set up a storefront. Rakuten and Yahoo are both e-commerce shopping malls. So in order to trade on them, you have to actually create a virtual store, kind of like a mini website. So once you have that, the beauty of it is consumers can shop, can stay within your store. Okay, in Amazon, it's quite different. If they select your product, your honey, for example, Amazon will show them 8 other merchants that are selling a similar or the same product. With Rakuten and Yahoo, that doesn't happen. Once a user is in your storefront, they can shop around, and they're not directed to any other outside competitor. So in that sense, Rakuten pricing tends to be a bit higher than Amazon because the competitive set in Amazon is extremely high. Whereas with Rakuten, the competition comes with how attractive is your storefront, how do you present your products. As Kanzo said, you see a Rakuten storefront has this much information, videos, how to use, and then Amazon has six bullet points. So it's a fundamentally different proposition for the consumer. Commissions tend to run around 10% on average. Yahoo has the lowest commission, but they tend to charge a bit more on the marketing side. Rakuten is right around 10 or 11%, and Amazon is around 10% on average, although some product categories can be as high as 15%. Okay, this slide shows you the relative strengths of each of the 3 major marketplaces. So if you look on the left side, you'll see Rakuten has the largest market share, and that is accurate. There's a lot of debate who's bigger or who's better or whatever, but the pure fact of the matter is Rakuten is the largest marketplace in Japan, and for certain product categories is essential to be trading on. For example, books and electronics, you can see Amazon is by far the leader, but you can see most of the other major product categories, Rakuten is clearly the leader. So if your product categories fall on the left side of that blue line, I think it's almost imperative that you consider trading also on Rakuten. Okay, I'm going to bang through this. This is the kind of go-to guide. This is the how-to guide of how to get into the market here in Japan, at least through the marketplaces. I'll skip through the obvious ones. The market research, familiarize yourself with your competitors. But practically speaking, if you're going to import a product, not using the cross-border model, right? The cross-border model is individual import. There are very few, if any, restrictions on the type of products that can come in using this method. Nutritional supplements, skincare products, things that would be really, really heavily regulated from a bulk shipment entry. Importing would be easy to do. But if you are going to import product, you first have to see, does my product need some special import, food-related products, skincare, nutritional supplements? There's a large number of products that will require some type of testing or import permit if you want to ship in bulk. Apparel, books, other novelty goods typically don't require any type of import processing. Customs clearance, you will need an importer of record if you have products that require some type of import permit. If not, all you need is a customs clearance agent to help get the product in either to the warehouse that you'll be using or to Amazon if you're going to use that. I talked about the account establishment. Amazon and Rakuten are open to you directly. Yahoo, you'll have to use an agent for if you want to trade there. I've talked about the storefront development, so I think we can skip that. And then e-commerce business operations. Amazon is beautiful because everything is the same. If you're trading on Amazon Japan, it looks exactly like you're trading on Amazon the US. Rakuten is different. Everything's in Japanese, as is Yahoo, and you'll need somebody who can speak Japanese, read Japanese, and can understand the complexities of those two marketplaces, and they are complex. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. They're actually quite sophisticated marketplaces with a lot of tools that Amazon lacks. So if you're into marketing, if you feel like you have a good sense of your product and how to present it, Rakuten and Yahoo can actually be quite good platforms to trade on. Like you heard earlier about the way Japanese creative looks, you can see on the left side, it's actually quite busy. There's a lot going on in the storefront. And as I mentioned, it's kind of like a mini website. And there's a lot going on. We tend to create a little bit cleaner, a little bit more elegant designs because we think as a international brand, we should look a little bit different than Japanese, but certainly you need to be familiar to the Japanese eye or you'll probably get a lot of bounce offs. Warehousing and fulfillment. Japan has an incredibly sophisticated and capable and relatively inexpensive logistics system. As you probably know, it's quite famous for that. There are a lot of options. There are cold storage, there are cold delivery. There's a lot of options available out there. Next day delivery is expected now if you're living in a major city. So it's actually quite good. And the Japanese are tolerant. They know if they're ordering from an international cross-border model, they know it's going to take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They tend to be patient, but one of the dangers of the cross-border model is delays in shipping lead to negative reviews, lead to trouble with the marketplace, and possibly even suspension. So it is something to think about. We've developed models to help alleviate that risk or at least mitigate it. And you'll need to think about those things if you decide on the cross-border model. And then financial management is simply about if you are using an agent, for example, for Yahoo, the money will not come to your bank account, it'll come to the agent's account. The fact that you're an American company is good because Amazon will send the funds directly back to your bank account, as will Rakuten. But what we have typically done with our clients is they choose one of the marketplaces to have the funds come to their agent, and the agent then pays all of the local domestic costs, therefore eliminating the need for our clients to actually transfer money to Japan. We tend to just transfer money from Japan to our clients. I won't talk about social media and wholesale and retail expansion, but as you develop your website, as you get a proof of concept here, it's much easier to go to a wholesaler or a major retailer and say, hey, we've got 2,000 customers on our e-commerce sites and our marketplaces. We have proof of concept. Wouldn't you be interested in carrying our products offline? It's a much, much easier conversation than to just go to them outright and say, we love our product. You should love our product too. Please take it, which I can't tell you how many times I've heard international companies say that to me, and I deal with that as best I can. Okay, and this just basically summarizes things. I just wanted to touch on one thing about BPI. We do offer what we call a complete turnkey e-commerce solution. We basically, all the things that I went through, we do on behalf of our clients. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that the fact that there is the possibility of a consolidated warehouse in Hawaii makes the whole cross-border model a little more interesting, because it allows maybe those of you that don't have the logistics in place to do the cross-border model. Maybe we can combine orders, for example, thus reducing the cost to you to ship to Japan. If we are going to do bulk imports, to consolidate it in a single container from Hawaii, send it to Japan, disperse it as needed. That's another huge money saver. So I'm very impressed, and I'll be very honest with you, because I deal with a lot of the embassies and a lot of the other government agencies that are trying to support market entry operations for their country's companies. This is very, very comprehensive, and Hawaii seems to be at the leading edge of a lot of it. So hats off to our American government colleagues and associates here, I do think there's a very nice business opportunity for Hawaiian companies in Japan.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Wonderful presentation. I think we probably need to schedule a whole separate webinar just on the possibility of the Hawaiian product showcases and some ideas about consolidation and what have you. There's a question here for you specifically. While these marketplaces, Rakuten and Amazon, Yahoo, are huge with a tremendous reach, how do Hawaii companies stand out in such an environment? And how do you overcome costs that these marketplaces charge, like commissions and the monthly fees and what have you?
That's a very good question. Well, it's push and pull, right? If I go back to my Rakuten associates and I say to them, tell me how many SEO requests you get for the word Hawaii or Hawaiian or others, they will say it's probably in the millions every month. So there is an organic demand and interest amongst Japanese users for things Hawaiian. So that's item number one. That's the pull, right? The pull. The push is you market. You spend money. You have to spend money. What do they say? You got to spend money to make money, right? You have to spend money smartly. And there are a lot of tools available to make your products, your store, available and knowledgeable to Japanese users. So that's really it. It's not much more complicated than that, but of course, doing it successfully and doing it right is the challenge. In terms of the costs, Amazon is cheaper than Rakuten. You have to pay an annual user fee that is 4 times higher on Rakuten than Amazon. It's about $2,500 a year for trading, for the pleasure of trading on Rakuten. Yahoo doesn't charge anything, and Amazon charges $50 a month. So it's $600 a year. So you can see it's it's actually 4 times higher on Rakuten, and you have to factor that into your P&L. 10% for commissions. Let's call it 5% for the pleasure of using the marketplace. 15% for marketing, at least at first, right? So that's what is that? Plus my math. 10, 5, 15. That's 30. Maybe you use an agent like BPI, where somewhere around 10 or 15%. That's 45%. You got to get the product here. Okay, it's another 5 or 10%. There you go. 50% of your selling price is eaten up in costs. So first thing we ask our clients is, okay, what percentage is your cost of goods sold? If it's 30%, you're selling your 30 cents for, you're selling something for $1, 50% goes out in these costs. I don't want to say it so flippantly, but these are the costs of doing business. You've got a 20% margin. So that's the basic calculation that goes on. The beautiful next thing is 2 things. One is shipping costs are often borne by the consumer. So you can actually allocate part of your costs to either cover some or all of your shipping related costs. In some cases, our clients enjoy a small profit on their average cost of logistics. The other thing is you can raise the price. If you're going to sell something in the United States for $10, you can probably sell it in Japan for $12 or $13, maybe even $15, depending on what the competitive set is. So instead of looking at, a margin where, okay, wow, 50% is going away based on our existing price, if that selling price is $12 or $13, that 50% reduces down to about 35%. So that's how it's typically done. And there are a lot of companies that have done it successfully and are profitable. There are some companies that have not been able to make it work. And you just need to go through the math, and we're always helpful. We're always more than willing and happy to work with potential customers, clients, whether you're a client or not, won't matter. I'll work with anybody that approaches me to help figure out those numbers.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Mark. We greatly appreciate having you here and look forward to some future interactions. The next speaker is easy to find because that's me, and we're a bit behind schedule, actually more than a bit behind. So I'm going to go through my presentation incredibly quickly, and I would refer attendees who are interested in international marketing or specifically Japan marketing to go back to our YouTube channel and look for some of the past videos, which are much longer. I have this presentation is essentially 60 slides, and I'm just going to get down to a very few of them. And feel free to contact me, or again, look back at the YouTube archive and you can see this in much more detail. My day job is the Asia sales manager, and really all I have ever done in my career is sell products in Asia, all over Asia. In Japan, I've lived approximately 7 years of my life in Japan, and I know the Japanese market very well and spend a lot of time working on marketing plans and helping companies execute in Japan, but certainly elsewhere in Asia. One of the things I think for Hawaii, as we've talked about a few times today, we have a lot of guests coming from Japan, visiting Hawaii, and therefore our interactions with Japanese consumers can be divided into a point of sale is in Japan or a point of sale is in Hawaii. And hopefully we have customers that are buying both of those. This is a model that I developed and I use in my consulting business, helping companies where essentially we start with social media and go around clockwise for magazine ads and websites. Tourists will buy and like the product, and the tourist buys omiyage or the gifts to take back to Japan with in-store signage there. We have packaging inserts to remind the customer how to buy refills in Japan. And then you're back working with, say, Kanzo Nara and his company with your bilingual website and your local social media and back and forth. And then eventually back to a company like Big Picture International that can stock your product in Japan. This is the cycle that I think we need to operate more and get our companies working on more. Another one where I see a lot of our local companies get hung up on is whether they should be going direct, have an agent, a distributor, a reseller, or what happens is a lot of them wind up impeded by these decisions and they wind up doing nothing, or they have a bad relationship with one agent and it doesn't work out and it leads them to be negative on the Japanese market. And I think that there's a lot of ways that some communication improvement can really help that situation. The marketing is really based on 4 Ps. This is just fundamental marketing 101 with product, price, place, and promotion. And I have a lot of strategies that our companies can use to excel in Japan. Several of our speakers, including Aoki-san from who's the general counsel here in Honolulu, he made comments about our products being made with aloha, fresh, quality. I think that we really need to play that up here locally. I use the example of there is a place in the world called Transylvania, and they market their products outside of Transylvania. And what comes to mind when you hear the word Transylvania? It's not the most positive terms in word association, but when in Japan, when you hear the word Hawaii, you hear aloha. The word association that comes with that is very clean and natural, bright blue skies, breezy, sunny, fantastic. And the state of Hawaii is constantly marketing on your behalf the aloha words, the made in Hawaii, made with aloha, and our companies really need to drill down on that. Another key point about selling in Japan, is the seasonal discounts and the seasonal sales. And I strongly urge our companies here to focus on these sales and work around them, build your marketing around them, have summer sales, winter sales, autumn sales, back to school sales based on the Japanese calendar. That will greatly improve your business. In year one, I think you could easily improve your business by 50% just by timing the sales correctly. That's still a major market driver in Japan, are the seasonal sales. I think a lot of the US has gotten away from that. In Hawaii, we don't think much about it because we're basically warm weather all the time, but you can imagine in the northern part of the mainland, there's some cold times when winter sales and what have you are relevant for clothing. But generally in Japan, seasonal sales are extremely important. So keep an eye on that calendar and get to know it a little better. I think I'll wrap up with omiyage as a main concept, in that it's more than a souvenir. I think most people in Hawaii have heard the term omiyage, but they don't fully appreciate how much brain power and caloric energy is expended by a Japanese tourist looking for omiyage to take back to their family, their work colleagues, etc. It's extremely important. And the more that you can help your customer buy from you, the better. I also consult to our companies here about the bag that they have and how the product is packaged in a bag so that the Japanese consumer can give that gift immediately. Really, a present cannot be given in Japan without being in some kind of a bag first. And if your bag matches your product packaging, it's so much better. I'd also refer you to this concept of omiyage banashi, or hanashi sometimes pronounced. And that's the story behind the omiyage, and that I went to Hawaii and I'm bringing you back this gift that's representative of my trip to Hawaii. So that could be chocolates and creams and sunscreens and clothing and anything, but it's very Hawaii oriented gift. And the more that our manufacturers build in the story of their company and their own personal story into the product, it's extremely helpful for the consumer from Japan to buy that product and give it as a gift on return to Japan. And I think that it was Aoki-san that said that these 1.5 million visitors coming from Japan every year spend approximately $2 billion in Hawaii. I personally guarantee half of that $2 billion is on this omiyage that they're taking back. These aren't cheap souvenirs. I'm not talking about the little hula girl that goes on a dashboard or something kitschy like that. I'm talking about very nice gifts that they're taking back. I'll just leave it with the easier that you can make it for your customer to buy from you, the better it will be. And I'll just finish back here with this model that I believe that this is where we need to be and our companies need to be moving in this direction. As I said, this presentation is long. I'm out of time, but I will put this in the folder with the other presentations and share the Dropbox link with all of those presentations in here, and you're welcome to go through them at length. And then please contact the individual speakers who have their contact information there. With that, I will end and open it up to any last minute questions that may have come in. There's one we got for Taki-san, and she replied to me by text. The question was this: we are working to export an existing cosmetic product that has been tested and approved. We will be exporting it as a white label under our own brand, but it's the same product. Do we need to get tested again, or can we rely on the original approval? Taki-san's
advice is that it probably needs to be retested again because it's based on a SKU, and the SKU will be different even though it's a white label. But she's going to check just to make sure with her colleague who is an expert on that topic. But my own experience too suggests that it probably needs to be retested as the product is in the Japanese system based on the SKU level there. Okay. Do we have any further questions coming in? All right. With that, then, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for a really wonderful program. I hope that our audience knows a bit more about exporting to Japan, but also who are some contacts that they can follow up with to get specific advice on exporting to Japan. So with that, let's thank Jamie Lum from DBET, Aoki-san and Matsuzawa-san from the Japan Council here in Honolulu, Jay Biggs and Hirono Taki from the US Consulate in Osaka, John Holman from the US Commercial Service here, Mary Dale from SBA, Cindy Matsuki from the Foreign Trade Zone and EXIM, Keith Suzuka from M4 Law, Brian Suzuki from Hawaii Air Cargo, Kanzo Nara from Imagine Web Creation, Mark Quody from Big Picture International, and again, I'm Rob Hack from the Asia Sales Manager, and on behalf of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending, and thanks again for all of our speakers. We greatly appreciate your expertise. This video will be edited and live on our YouTube channel in about a week. And to all attendees, I'll be sending out a link to the Dropbox folder with PDFs of the presentations that I have. Mahalo to everyone. Have a nice rest of your day in Japan and a good evening here in Hawaii. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Aloha.